Chapter 1, Born in the Bayou. On December 29, 1953, in New Orleans Charity Hospital, I entered the world kicking and screaming in a cesarean ritual of blood and scalpels. Because this was the late 1950s, in pre-civil rights Louisiana, my 17-year-old mother, a colored woman, was deprived of anesthetics as her torso was slit from sternum to pubic bone. Over and over again, she sang the Christmas carol, Silent Night, to distract her from the pain. I was Christian Stanley Tookie Williams III, but mostly referred to as Tookie. Perhaps my laborious birth and a seizure I experienced before the age of 2, requiring a spinal tap, foreshadowed more tragic things to come. But I've always felt that the real adversity fell on my teenage mother because of her station in life, a black woman living in the South and with very little money. Morbid conditions of poverty were eager to devour us. Being exposed to this apocalyptic society as I grew to adolescence, my thin skin of innocence began to peel slowly away. In my life, the natural progression from maternal weaning to paternal guidance was absent. My father was the weak link in the family equation. He had abandoned us before I reached my first birthday. My memories of him were so remote that I could not have recognized him in a jailhouse lineup. He was like a stranger showing up once in a blue moon bearing gifts and an uncertain smile. His attempts at playing part-time Santa Claus and spreading good cheer failed to win me over. As far as I was concerned, my father was an unwelcome visitor whom I watched carefully until he vacated the premises. My mother was the true backbone of the family. She was hardworking, serious, tough, and soft-spoken, and had the foot speed of a cheetah. I can attest to that quickness through my many failed attempts to escape punishment. Prior to my mother's pregnancy, she was well known as a track star. Her genes were passed down to me. I could outrun my peers and many older youths. Standing at 5 feet 2 inches, she was a vision of loveliness with chocolate-hued skin, a shapely physique, and long, silky black hair. But my mother's beauty attracted a lot of unwanted male attention. Though her no-nonsense expression held most men at bay, a few boldly approached. Their foolhardy advances compelled me, for a while, to carry a sharpened 7-inch butcher knife concealed in my waistband. To protect my mother, I would have happily become a ninja mercenary. Unknown to my mother, I later stashed that knife beneath a slab of rock in the backyard. Had she discovered it, I would have been severely beaten or disciplined, as she called it. My mother adhered religiously to the Judeo-Christian Bible, in particular Proverbs 13:24. He who spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteth him betimes, whips him quickly. Yes, my mother loved me deeply, and I regularly felt her love sting. But compared to the beatings some of my friends received from their parents, I got off easy. I will admit that the biblically inspired beatings did make me tougher. On the other hand, her punishments failed to derail my misbehavior. The frequency of beatings aged me considerably. I became more unruly, distant, and indifferent to the predictable consequence of my actions. By no means was I born a criminal. I understood the penalties for my actions all too well. Though my mother tried to instill in me the fundamentals of right and wrong, the development of my conscience was shaded with different meanings. I learned from the street culture that criminal activity was an economic necessity and violence a means to a desired end. Plain and simple. In my neighborhood, if you wanted something, you had to take it and then fight to keep it. I clashed often with my mother over my mindset and incorrigible behavior. Whatever was physically possible for a mischievous youth my size to do, I did. Motivated by greed and envy, I took to stealing little food items and toys from stores. If my mother happened to discover any item unaccounted for, she would march me back to return the item, or would destroy it. Although I didn't completely understand this, my philosophy was hardening: adapt and survive. That was the street rule. Sometimes my partner in crime was Rex, my brown and white mutt dog. The entire neighborhood was in an uproar over my letting Rex run through the flower beds and chase chickens and roosters. Time and time again, I was warned about unleashing Rex, but it was all fun and games to me. Eventually I had to watch teary-eyed as Rex was hauled away to the dog pound. If there was a lesson to be learned, I didn't grasp it. Being mischievous, hyperactive, and with a short attention span, I had to find something to do. My older cousin Walter and I used to slide and tumble on a gunny sack down a nearby dirt hill. Too poor to afford baseball equipment, we liked playing stickball with rocks and would play stickball for hours before dinner. That was stopped after Walter hit a rock that smashed into my forehead. Blood gushed everywhere. My grandmother, Mama, simply patched me up with some beech nut chewing tobacco, a trusted home remedy, and I was good as new, but my stickball days were over. I believe it was the lingering racist effects of Jim Crow, systematic discrimination against Southern blacks during the period following the Civil War, as well as my incorrigible behavior that fueled my mother's desire to migrate to California. She first planned to leave me behind and then send for me after she got settled, but I was too hyperactive for my aunts and my aging grandmother. If you recall the Beverly Hillbillies and the woman called Granny, you will have a pretty good notion about Mama's stature and style of dress. A beautiful Cherokee Indian, she was 5 feet tall, about 90 pounds, with whitish gray shoulder-length hair and a copper penny skin tone. She was a devout Baptist who had served as a deaconess for 17 years in the New Salem Baptist Church in New Orleans. Mama spoke softly, her melodic voice often issuing quotations from biblical scriptures. Her religious influence was evident in each of her 16 children, 9 daughters and 7 sons. Mama's gospel sermons of fire and brimstone held my attention for years. I enjoyed sitting on the porch with her, drinking ice-cold lemonade, listening to her preach. Afterward, I would bombard her with questions. But I could not fathom why the religious figures in my drawings and paintings were all white, and most of them glowed. I remember trying to sneak a peek whenever I saw white men, women, or children, just to see if they really did glow. They did not. In all of the religious children's literature I was given to read, there was an obvious absence of black people. Everybody was white. Angels, Jesus, Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, Moses, and Noah. Only the devil was red. I'd ask Mama, where were the black people like us? Did God only make white people? Mama always seemed to be holding back. The more I'd ask race-based questions, the more she would say, boy, you're tiring me out with all your questions. Though I never did get a straight answer, I still believed something was not right with all those pictures depicting white figures as divine. Decades would pass before I'd be able to uncover the answers to those questions. I relished Mama's home-cooked meals, especially her gumbo and sweet potato pie. The gumbo consisted of crabs, shrimps, oysters, clams, crawdads, chicken, mild and hot link sausages, okra, and gumbo fowl. The taste was heavenly, etched forever in my taste buds. Her sweet potato pies were better than any store pies I ever tasted. There were times when Mama would fall silent. The mention of my grandfather inevitably stopped her. He was a huge, muscular, loving, pensive man who worked tirelessly on the railroad and held other jobs to support his large family. He died from overexhaustion. He worked himself to death. He left behind no pictures of himself. He didn't like taking them. My mother said he would fight if you tried to take a picture of him. Often my mother would tell me, if you want to know what your grandfather really looked like, just look in the mirror. Since he loved Mama as I did, there is no doubt I would have loved him too. I guess I didn't realize how much I loved Mama until my mother and I were on the Greyhound bus waving goodbye to her and our other relatives. Fear and curiosity had me wondering what was in store for us in California. I could see the sadness in Mama's expression, mirroring the tears streaming down my face.